The Solway has an amazingly varied coastline, from marinas to rocky shores and sandy bays. This video is an introduction to seaweeds, and we hope it will encourage people to take a closer look at the seaweeds on our shores. There are hundreds of varieties, and we've created a seaweed guide to help identify 15 of the common species. The seaweeds that we find on the middle shore are different from the ones at the lower shore, but often if we look in rock pools, we'll find the ones that we would expect lower down. So, for example, I've just discovered this amazing sugar kelp growing in a rock pool. And with it is growing some thongweed and some oarweed, all growing in the same rock pool. Also, if we look in rock pools, I'm afraid we often find the invasive species. So this is wireweed, or Japanese wireweed. This is an invasive species that is becoming more and more common here. It has very small bladders on it, and when you hang it up like this, it looks almost like a washing line. It tends to fix itself to small stones and to the sea bottom, and then floats in rock pools or in shallow seas. Really in calm places it grows. As we go further up the shore, we find other seaweeds. This one here is spiral rack. So spiral rack doesn't have bladders, but you'll notice that there's these reproductive parts at the end. So they look a bit like bladders, but the spiral rack has a sort of spiral look to the fronds. They kind of twist round, and then at the ends there's these reproductive parts that sends out the spores. And the one that we find at the top of the beach, at the driest area, is this one. This is channel rack. So this grows right at the very top of the seashore, and it's called channeled rack because each of the fronds has got a little channel in it, and this enables it to hold water for longer, so it manages to stay wet for longer when it's out of the tide, so it can survive the longest out of water. Although often when you find it on sunny days, it's black and crisp, but when it gets wet again, it becomes green and grows again. So that's channeled rack. Also in the rock pools, when you're looking even high up, you'll find the calcium seaweed, so the coral weed and the pink paintweed. And these are particularly probably good indicators of acidic seas. So as the seas become more acidic, so that these seaweeds will become less and less common. You often find them very high up on the shore, but in rock pools. So they're usually in rock pools, and you can see them as a pink paint or as a kind of fragile frond. And that's because they've got this hard exterior which creatures hate to eat, so it's a way of protecting itself. Finally, occasionally you find other interesting seaweeds. This one here is known as the oyster thief. So it grows as a bladder and usually attaches itself to stones or rocks, or sometimes to oysters. So it's supposed to, its reputation is that it attaches itself to oysters and then floats them away. So here we're at the lowest tide, and these rock pools have an amazing abundance of seaweeds, some of them that really only like being underwater all the time. So one of the kelps that we find here is this one here, Dabbalox. So this is one that prefers kind of rough areas and cold seas, and it's particularly noticeable because it has a very flimsy frond to it with a stipe that goes down the middle. This is actually one of the edible seaweeds, so people eat this seaweed, and it's particularly useful for measuring climate change. As the seas warm, it's likely that these plants will move further and further north. Also here, another seaweed that prefers to be in the water is this one here. This is known as saw rack or serrated rack, and the edges are are just like a saw, so they've got serrated edges to them. This red or purple seaweed grows on other seaweeds and is called dulse, so it's one of the popular edible seaweeds that we can find on our shore, but isn't one that we're surveying for. So some seaweeds have bladders which help them float in the sea. This is a seaweed called knotted rack or egg rack, and it has linear bladders, almost like eggs on it, hence the name. And it particularly grows in sheltered areas, so it has a long, thin branch with eggs on it, and one of these grows every year, so you can tell how old the seaweed is by counting the bladders on it. There is also a siphon weed that tends to grow on it, so this is the siphon weed associated with egg rack. There are so many amazing seaweeds growing on these rocks here, many of them not included in our guide. This one here is a flat fernweed, probably one known commonly as pepper dulse, and next to it is this globular one which is known as punctured ballweed, and it tends to grow on seaweeds as well. Also at low tide, within where the kelps are growing, like this allweed, we find thongweed. So this is a very long, thin weed. It separates into fronds like this, but each one grows out of a button-shaped seaweed. So this is actually the reproductive part, and this is the seaweed here growing like as a button from the rock. I hope this video has inspired you to take a closer look at seaweeds. Please pick up a seaweed guide and go out and record the seaweeds you find.